LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Retro Gamers Podcast, your home for casual coffee table conversations about everything retro gaming. Anthony here, as always, and we've got somebody new joining the podcast this week. I am really excited to say hello to my friend Bastion here. Bastion, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for having me. I've been excited to appear here for a while. Thank you.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm really excited to have you. I know I was trying to find the right time to reach out and be like, okay, what is Bastion gonna enjoy doing on this podcast? And I think we got a good one for everybody because there is a topic on this show that I have been avoiding for the 9 years plus that this show has been going on, because this show's been going on forever. Um, and we're going to be talking about first-person shooter games today, which is by far and away my weakest genre of gaming. But my understanding is that you are quite the expert at these things.
Well, I wouldn't call myself an expert, but I would say that this is the one genre of video games that if I were to speak with authority on any of them, that would be the closest one that I know most about, I guess.
All right.
But
Yeah.
I used to play them quite a bit and enjoy them. I know maybe that says more about me than about the other listeners of this podcast, and watchers. But
Yeah, but that's okay. But before we get to that topic for today, since this is your first time on the show, I thought I would put you on the hot seat for a little bit and just ask you to share a little bit of your background, both, like what you do and how you got into gaming. Give us the details, man.
well, yeah, okay, sure. My least favorite topic to talk about is myself, but if you put me in the hot seat, then I shall comply. So yeah, my name is Bastian Tenbergen. In my day job, I'm a professor of software engineering, and I got to that job because I was really into games when I was a kid. In fact, I always had a fascination ever since my dad brought home the first computer for the family. It was an Atari 8088. I had a fascination with these machines, with these computers, and that fascination kind of stuck with me to the point that now I'm, a vintage computer enthusiast. I run a small refurbishing business in a store and a very humble YouTube channel called Retro Bytemeister, where I'm pleased to announce that if your humble viewers, if they are so inclined, can enjoy 10% off store-wide using the checkout code Retro Gamers Podcast.
Oh,
So if
very
you want
cool.
to do that and support my work, I appreciate it. If not,
And
well,
I
elsewhere.
highly
Elsewhere.
recommend supporting his work. Check out his YouTube
Thank you.
channel, Retro Bytemeister. Your videos are very, very interesting, very informative.
Thank you.
Every time I watch them, I'm always learning something, because when it comes to computers, I will say this, I am a complete dummy when it comes to like going into the guts of them. So I'm always learning everything, like from you, from John, from Jack, like everybody I'm having on the show. It's like a computer invasion in a way.
I tell you what, it's I had kind of the same. I was in the same boat really until roughly the pandemic, because here's the thing. I was when I was a kid, I loved computers and I just found it fascinating. That just the technology and what makes them tick, I was particularly interested in software and I started tinkering with software on my own. In the tender age of 12, 13 or so. I mean, nothing great, just what 12, 13-year-olds in the early 90s would do, right? So but then of course I was very much into games, of course, and I remember playing on the amber CRT screens, and then later when I got my first own computer, it was all about first person shooters that I loved. And that really defined my career. And I started going to school not for computer science, but for cognitive science first. But then in graduate school, I went more into the software engineering field. And then in the pandemic, I decided, for a professor of this stuff, I know embarrassingly little about how a processor actually works.
Hmm. Okay.
Like literally, I don't know what a register is. I mean, I had a vague understanding. I could tell you all about bytes and bits and mentices and things like that, and converting the one from the other. But I never knew how a computer really works. So I started watching the Ben Eater series on building a breadboard computer on literally an 8-bit computer on breadboards, and I got hooked. So now I try to learn as much as I can about electronics, and it turns out I'm pretty handy at fixing them. Um, and that's how I got where I am right now with the YouTube channel and my little side business. And here we are.
Well,
It's fun.
it's awesome how you kind of almost like fell into that side of it when you just realized, like, when the pandemic hit and you were home, you were like, hey, you know what? Here's an opportunity for me to actually learn this other part of my profession that I know little about. And now
Yeah.
here you are, like, in my opinion, like with the videos you post up, like, you seem like you're all pro with it because you're just, you know,
Thank you.
yeah, it seems like,
I'm faking you good.
I was just gonna say, no, no, no. You make it look easy. You're very knowledgeable of it. So, like, when it comes to this stuff, you're kind of like a sponge. You're just taking it all in, and you have a thorough understanding.
Something I like to tell my students is when you do something that you love, right? And I'm not going to fill you up with these golden phrases like "you never work a day in your life." Right. I mean, it's still work, right? But
Yes, it
if you do
is.
something that you love, it comes easier to learn it. It becomes easier to retain it, and it becomes easier to also apply it. And I make a lot of mistakes, like you know, lots of mistakes. But that's okay. No one was born perfect, and every mistake makes you a little bit better. And at this point, I can probably fix a Commodore 64, no matter what's wrong with it, within an hour or two.
Oh, wow.
If there's only one thing wrong with it, that is. Yeah, I'm like, I mean, at least know what the problem is, right?
Mm.
I probably had like at this point 30 or 40 of those that I fixed. And
Oh,
it
wow.
comes, you get knowledgeable about what's wrong with the computers themselves, in the
Yeah.
sense that what's the typical failure points, and okay, I can just swap something, and then sometimes it's easy. Other podcasters, or rather other YouTubers, like Adrian Black from Adrian's Digital Basement, that's where I learned a lot from.
Cool.
And he's very methodical. He will not just swap the chip that is likely to fail. Oh, good, it works, and then be done with it. Now he will investigate why the chip failed, right? And that
Oh,
is very interesting to me.
he's the
But
comp
I guess
he's
the
the
people who
computer
watch me don't need
detective.
another channel who does that.
He's a
Oh,
computer detective, yes. Um,
he's also the man could also read the damn phone book, and I would find it entertaining. He's just such
nice.
a such an entertaining way of presenting things.
Well,
And
it's
I'd just
funny.
like to,
Yeah,
go
it's
ahead.
fun.
Sorry,
As I say,
sorry.
no, no, no. It's funny that you bring up the Commodore 64 because I just ordered a SID chip for mine.
Oh
Because
yeah.
this because the sound. Well, the story. What happened was the SID chip I had originally, just the sound isn't working, right? And
Yeah, they
John
like to fail.
Story, who's been on the show many times, and actually is the reason why
Mutual
we
friend of
we
ours.
yeah,
Yes,
mutual friend. It's the reason, it's how we met, right? And
that's how we
John
met.
told
Yep, we
yeah,
met through John.
John sent me a link to order the SID chip for my Commodore 64 to install it, to put it in so I can get, the sound working on it. Um, and he told me, he's like, yeah, he's like, next time I come by, I'll install it. And then some time went by and he didn't come by. And I'm like, you know what? I go, maybe I can find a video online. So I found a video online on how to replace a SID chip. And I'm like, oh, okay,
Yep.
this is easy. I'll do it myself. Opened up my Commodore
Yeah, they're
64.
socketed.
Yep. Did all that, took out the broken SID chip, put in the new SID chip, turned it on, and then I'm like, why does it smell like smoke? And
Oh
I'm
no.
like,
Did you
I
put it
was like,
upside down?
I put it upside down.
Oh, Anthony.
So
Oh
again,
no.
this is not my again, not my wheelhouse.
No,
So
I understand. It's an easy mistake to make.
yes.
And a mistake I will admit now, but never admit to it ever again. I may have made once or twice, or maybe even this
Ooh.
morning.
Hey. All right. Well,
It
you know what?
happens. What I'm saying is it happens.
Yes, it happens. So I just ordered a new one. It'll be here next week. And
Ah,
then
shoot. Didn't survive.
I will very patiently put it aside and wait for John to show up and put it in himself so I don't have to do it upside down again. Because I'm not going there. That's it. I burned it
Did you order
once.
yeah, I understand. Did you order an OG sit or did you get the sit kick?
No, sit kick. I got a sit kick.
Yeah, good call.
So
These, I was gonna say the original sit chips. I mean, if you really want to buy one, you have to like put up a small mortgage or something like this. Get a second mortgage on your house because
yeah, I'm not
this
doing
is
that.
what right? No, and I like keeping computers as original as possible, but I also like when I repair them, but I also like to make them make them future proof, right? So that they don't need to fail again in the future. It also depends on for whom I fix it. If I fix it for myself, I will probably go with a safer, less full prone to failure route.
Yep.
But it also depends on what the customer wants, right? Some people say upgrade it, and sometimes to the point where I'm like, is this really still a Commodore? Is this really still an Atari? Mhm.
Yep.
But hey, customer's king, right? So on the
Always.
other hand, some people say no, keep it original,
Hmm.
and I get it. It's like there's but I would go with a sit chip too, mainly because they
Yeah.
sound nicer, they run way cooler, they use less power, and they're not likely to fail. And if they fail, it's gonna set you back another $25 and not another 100.
Bastion, thank you so much for introducing yourself and everything that you do. I think this is going to be great for the conversation we're about to have about first person shooters. And
Exciting.
since you are well aware, because I've warned you before we recorded this episode, that this is the weakest genre in video gaming that I have. Um, so I'm going to be leaning a little bit on you when we get to the real discussion of these games. But
Okay.
before we get there, I wanted to do a little bit of a history lesson on first
Yes.
person shooters. And to do that, we need to go all the way back. And now this surprised me because again, like I had to do my research on this because I don't know FPS games that well.
Mhm.
So I had no idea that I thought I would go back to like the early 90s or something like this. Had no idea that I had to go all the way back to 1973
I'm shocked
to
too.
yeah, to the grandfather, great grandfather, whatever you want to call it. So like the the initial um 3D not 3D first person shooter. And we're going to go to a game that's called Maze War.
Maze War. Yes.
Maze War is 1973. It was a 3D multiplayer first person shooter maze game that was developed by three high school students. Their names were Greg Thompson, Steve Colley, and Howard Palmer. They were in a NASA work study program. And what they did was they wanted to create, hold on, I have the information right here. They wanted to create a game or a program that would visualize fluid dynamics for spacecraft designs. And so what they did was they came up with this
Wow.
maze game and they put it in first person and it allowed you to do exactly what they wanted to do to understand the fluid dynamics. And then what they wound up doing was they
Yeah.
later included um, the ability to add a second player. And then once they added the second player, they added the multiplayer aspect of the goal was
Wow.
to shoot the other player to win the game. And that's where we got our, as far as my research is concerned, the very first person shooter game, 1973 by three high school students.
1973. My goodness. Like if this is high school students.
Yeah.
1973 is blowing my mind. I thought the first when we talked about this recording this podcast, um, I thought we would go like you. I thought we would go as far back as maybe like late 80s or mid 80s or so, or whenever Battlezone came out. But that's the first memory that I have of the oldest kind. But when I looked up Maze War. it really looks like the Windows 95 Labyrinth or Maze screensaver, right? Except
Yes.
only green lines, and everything is black. It's
Yep.
like and to think as that as the first 3D shooter is blowing my mind, especially considering one of the, from a software perspective, one of the difficult things of multiplayer first-person shooters is to
Mhm.
translate game states between the two involved parties, right? Because how do you synchronize whom shooting whom first? So
Yeah.
that's an interesting, algorithmically very interesting, but and not non-trivial to understand that they have done it in 1973. PDP-10s were still around then, and if I'm not mistaken, Maze
Mm.
War was targeted for the PDP-10, wasn't it? Wasn't it built on? Didn't they build it on that? At least it's what
I
Wikipedia
think,
told me.
yeah, I was gonna say if you're looking at Wikipedia, that's probably right. Um, that's honestly that's kind of where yeah, PDP-10. Yeah, Digital Equipment
Look
Corporation
at that.
PDP-10.
Yeah,
Yep.
it's the PDP-10.
Yeah,
And
I
this
mean,
is like, those of you who don't know what a PDP-10 is, go look it up right this minute. It is a computer that is huge. It's
mhm.
very, very big. It's nothing like, 1973, 4 years later, the Trinity of 1977, the TRS-80, Commodore PET, and Apple II came out. And this is like what people would think of the 70s personal computer. So when we
Yep.
say PDP-10, we're thinking like mainframe things,
Yes. You're talking about
corporate big old
you.
stuff.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're talking about computers that fill rooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just insane.
And
What?
they run 3D shooters.
Yeah,
Yes.
but granted, this one obviously is monumental because it's the first one.
Yeah.
What blows my mind is the one that came next, which was only a year later in 1974. It was a game called Space Sim. Now, the first, again with Maze War, there were two players involved, right?
Yep. Yep.
Space Sim was developed at the University of Illinois, and it was developed on the Plato mainframe system. Now, I honestly don't. I mean, I know what a mainframe system is. I don't know what the
Right.
Plato mainframe system is specifically,
Yeah.
but Space Sim was a space flight simulator, a first-person shooter, a first-person space flight simulator for up to 32 players. So we went from 2
I
to
didn't know that.
32 players a year later. Just
Yeah.
like that.
And
Um, which is insane.
exactly. It it's insane. It's completely insane. I guess, from a 2026 perspective, it would seem insane that it's such a big jump, right?
Mhm.
But I think thinking about this, and now we're actually talking more about computer architecture than 3D shooters. But if you think about the common system that was typical at the time, it was these mainframe-ish type things, right? Where you had one computer that sits somewhere in the basement, and then you had a bunch of terminals attached to it. And 32 is a typical number of terminals you have attached to those. So these
Okay.
PDP-10s, these Platos, these Altair 8088s, and things like that, they were all really optimized for multi-user access. Even the CPUs, they would oftentimes have like special registers to maintain the user session status. So, which I guess with hardware level support for to switch fast between user sessions
Hmm.
would very likely make this a lot easier to implement like 32. Like, at that time, it doesn't matter if you have two players or 32 players. You know what I'm saying?
It would be all the
But I
same.
guess it would be all the same because
Yeah.
you're doing session shifting and session registration and map memory and secure memory areas anyways because you have to have two players. Might as well make 31 more copies. No big deal. But of course, coming from a DOS gaming era, right,
Hmm.
where DOS was very much a single user operating system back in the day.
Yes.
Um, that is the DOS and multiplayer as we talk about those DOS first
Yeah.
person shooters in a minute. But there was it was very difficult to synchronize a Doom session, right, across a
Yeah.
network.
Oh man,
So
yeah.
that was, yeah. So, but anyways, 32 players. Wow,
30,
it must have
30.
felt like,
Yeah. It had to, yeah. I mean, I can only imagine like the like how awesome that must have felt.
Right.
in 1974. And the way the game played was 32 players fly spaceships around four planetary systems. Players are grouped into teams of up to 8 players with one team per system. And
Wow.
then you
It's
control
cooperative too.
yeah, it was cooperative. So you yeah, so you had up to 8 players on a team. You each controlled your ship in the 3D environment. And then the other ships would appear on the screen as wireframe models. And then
Sure.
obviously the players would try to destroy the other players' ships. Um, and apparently the game was so well liked and used at the University of Illinois that they had gotten to a point where they had to shut it down because it was
Yeah.
distracting students too much because they were just hogging
And he
up.
was playing all the time.
Yeah, they were just playing games.
Oh
So,
no.
but still, again,
I
like
can imagine how what that must have been.
yep, a 32 player game in 1974, which to me just like it blows my mind a little bit. And again, like for the history we're talking here, like I kind of picked out games that like had some type of contribution to first person shooters to where we got to today. So, and then the next one I have is just a year later, which was a game called Panther. And the reason why I bring this one up, it was
Remember
also
Panther, yeah.
used on a Play-Doh system, and it was a tank simulator. And the reason why I bring this up is
Yeah.
because of the game that you mentioned. It's eventually Atari took this concept from Panther about a tank simulator and came up with Battlezone, which came out 5 years later, 5 years after Panther.
That's
Um,
it's that's insane that it's a 5 year gap from the one to basically what you're saying is that it took them 5 years to figure out how to take this off of a mainframe and
yep,
put this into what could be qualified as a personal computer, which,
exactly.
it's they're the platform differences between a mainframe and a personal computer is vast. We might as well talk about the difference between I don't know, a motorcycle and a tractor trailer with
Mm. Oh wow,
18 wheeler.
quite the
I mean, they're
difference.
both motor vehicles, sure, but they're vastly different, right?
Yep.
So, and it seems to me that somehow the big iron era of computers was somehow predestined to produce first person shooters,
Yeah.
which is amazing. I remember Battlezone. I remember playing Battlezone for the first time actually.
Okay.
Remember when in the around 2000 when flash games were a thing?
Oh yeah.
That's what we did instead of,
I remember playing
right?
Flash games all the time, and I was actually very crushed when Flash went away, when they got rid of it. I was like, why do we losing
Yeah.
Flash? But you know,
As a computer scientist, I was a little less sad, but
of course,
the Flash was just, might have security holes the size of a tractor trailer.
that was the
Um,
problem. Yes.
Yeah, but I remember playing them really well, and this is how in college. This is how we didn't pay attention to lecture is by playing flash games, right? And I
Hmm.
remember playing Battlezone, and I didn't get the real Battlezone experience until last year, when a friend of mine who here I live in upstate New York, and he runs the Skillshot Arcade, which is a pinball arcade in Syracuse, New York.
Oh, very
Um,
nice.
yeah, his name is Ryan, and he's such a great dude. Also, has got a YouTube channel. Sorry, Ryan, I don't remember he was a watcher of your channel too, of the Retro Gamers
Oh,
podcast. So,
nice. Tell him I said thank you.
quick. I shall tell him that. And he has actually a Battlezone machine, and he brought
Oh,
it to the
nice.
Syracuse Retro Game Con last year, and that's probably what I played the most on that con. That's
That's
great.
so cool.
And it's so slow. The difference is nowadays the gamers who play first the Fortniters and whatever Battlefielders, they are talking about, oh, why can't I run this game in 4K at 60 FPS or 120 FPS? And I'm like, okay, you understand that we played Battlezone at like 4 frames a second or something like
Yep.
this. It was
Yeah, where
really
literally
slow.
you had to move from one square to the next, and all your turns were 90 degrees. There was no subtlety to it. It was just like, nope, you had to
Yeah.
do like, yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
I think it was Panther was like that. Panther, I think.
it,
Battlezone actually you can have more than a 90
it was
degree
more
turns.
dynamic.
Not
Yeah.
much though. I think there was the internal model of the game, I think has like separates of 5-degree turns or something like that. But
Yeah.
who knows?
Well, it
I don't
also
remember.
used that one actually used vector graphics too, a vector graphics display.
Correct.
So I think
Yes.
that also helped it along. And it is considered it's considered the first successful first person shooter video game. So the first, I guess,
Yeah.
first monetarily successful one. I mean, I have a copy of Battlezone, I believe, for the Atari 2600. So I think I do.
Probably have one too. Now that you mention that, I probably gonna go find it later.
Yeah, I know.
Probably
Now
have
I'm
one
not
too.
like now I want to grab a copy of that. Okay. So going from
Right?
go
If I
go
don't have one, we're gonna fight each other on eBay.
yes, exactly. No, I'll let you have it. It's fine. Moving on from Battlezone, the next first person shooter I just wanted to touch on briefly was a game called Way Out. Way Out. It's actually one word, Wayout. It was released in 1982. It was a 3D first person perspective game. Obviously, I'm going to say that over and over again. It was
Yep.
published for the Atari 8-bit computer.
Yes.
It was also released eventually for Apple II, Commodore 64 a year later. And the reason why I bring up Way Out because it is one of the first maze games to offer a full 360-degree 3D perspective and movement. And it
Yes.
also used ray casting to render the environment based on your position in the game. So now,
Really?
yes, so now you're starting to get that
Wow.
real 3D environment working for you as you're moving around on the screen. Um, Again, this is a game I've never played, but it was interesting. It was interesting to read up on. Like this is where we really started to get that 3D maze feel in that first person.
Yeah.
Um, and the game was pretty deep too because the gameplay of it, there are 26 different mazes, and you have to find an exit in the maze using a compass and a map making kit. The game automatically maps the areas that the player explores and records how many movement units you use up, and that's your score. So the
Yes.
goal is to get through the maze with as little movement as possible. But then
To
in
play the
each
game as little as possible.
exactly, but then in each maze there's wind that blows in a certain direction that keeps you from moving forward, and you run into that.
Didn't know that.
And then on top of that, there is a computer controlled opponent, so almost like an AI controlled opponent. And if you run into that AI, it takes away your compass. So then it's even more difficult for you to navigate your way through the maze. So it's all very interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, interesting and involved for what it was.
I forget, like, it's very interesting to me. It's like that it's did you battle the AI? Because I never
No,
played the game, so you don't. Is it
no,
really a
you
first
just
person shooter?
you.
Right?
This was more of like I think this was more along the lines of starting to define the
Yeah.
environment, and that's the reason why I wanted to bring this one up. It wasn't necessarily that it was an FPS, but it started to define the environment in a different way that would come to benefit FPS games moving forward in the 80s.
Yeah, and introduces objectives other than mindless point and shoot, right? And
Exactly.
introduces game mechanics that are a little bit more advanced and maybe require tactics, which is
Mhm.
something that, my favorite 3D first-person shooter games are the ones where it's not mindless, but where you can employ tactics and like, be smart about things or dumb, depending on my mood.
Yeah. Yeah, usually with me in first person, I if I ever play them, I'm usually the dumb one in the game. So, um, the next
Well, I'm the dumb one usually, but sometimes I like to pretend.
Well, we all like to pretend. That's part of the fun. Moving on to the next one that I wanted to point out, and this one I had to bring up because, as a huge Pac-Man fan, right? You want to talk about the maze craze, right? We're talking
Yes.
about Pac-Man, but Pac-Man was always obviously a flat 2D base maze, with the exception of a few things like Pac-Mania, where they tried to play around with it and everything like that. But then we got to 1987 and a game called MIDI Maze, MIDI
Yeah.
Maze, which was a first person shooter maze video game for the Atari ST. Um,
Wow.
and the uh, but what it was, what they wound up doing is they ported this game. It was like it was basically a version of Pac-Man, but in the first person perspective.
Yeah.
And they later ported the game to the Game Boy and the Super Nintendo. And people out there may know this version of the game because it was called Faceball 2000. And when I
Yes.
saw Mini Maze, I had no idea what Mini Maze was, but as soon as I saw the name Faceball 2000, I was like, yeah, I remember Faceball 2000, where everybody was a different color Pac-Man, and the object was to find each other in the maze and then shoot, and
And
shoot your
shoot. Yeah.
opponent and take them out. So again, it was cool to see that Pac-Man made his way into a first-person shooter style game because I never put that together. I never put two and two together. That like with Faceball 2000 was an FPS game when you think about it.
You know what? I didn't even know that. I knew Faceball 2000 and knew Mini Maze. I didn't know it was the same game.
I had no idea either. Like that's what I'm saying.
Wow.
It's like doing the research. I was like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. And then obviously with Mini Maze, you were able to have up to 16 computers daisy chained together to play against each other. So you can actually have 16 players in a Mini Maze game. And then for Game Boy and Super Nintendo, I think for Super Nintendo it was only two players, right? It has split screen.
Oh yeah,
Um,
of course. Yeah.
for Game Boy, well, they rumored that there was a 16 player mode that you can do with like adapters. Because you know how you used to have the
On
Game Boy
Game Boy?
adapter?
Wow.
Well, there used to be Game Boy adapters
Yes.
that you can attach them, but I don't know if you can chain 16 of them. So, um, but,
What?
uh, but who knows, Um,
Is-
and then moving off of Mini Maze, now we're getting into the 90s. And the 90s to
yeah.
me is when this is when we had the explosion of first person shooters.
Yeah.
And the first one I want to mention is important because of what it brings to the table.
Yeah.
And I know we talked about this before we recorded because you've played this game. I have not. And the name of the game is called Catacomb 3D.
Yeah.
It came out in 1991. It was actually the third game in the Catacomb series.
Yes.
Uh, Again, produced by id Software, and id Software's name is going to pop up for a
A bunch of
while when we
times
talk.
moving
Yeah, a bunch of
forward.
times we talk
Yep.
about this. But the important thing that this game brought to the table is that this was one of the first games to introduce the idea of texture mapping in the game.
Yeah.
So now
Yep.
all of a sudden your environment has a tremendous amount of detail.
Yes.
And just adding to the experience of it all. We're talking about, if you're talking about a maze game, you're talking about walls with like, brick walls with, actual like color on them and detail,
Yep.
and you're running through the maze.
Yep.
So, and the idea behind this game is that you are a wizard and you're going into the catacombs of a cemetery to defeat an evil like, right?
Yep.
And rescue your girl and rescue one of your friends. So, and again, they try to do, with the texture mapping, like the details of the catacombs, this dark, eerie kind of place. Obviously, to do that in this type of game, they were using more like neon greens for slime and reds for blood and stuff like that. So just really, really cool to have that development in a first person shooter.
Yeah, and you know what? I tell you what, it's what I liked about Catacomb, and I had to remind myself of that game because I played it out of order, I would say, because
Mhm.
just like Battle Zone, I played that when I was in like my late teens or so, um, in early 20s, and Catacomb is in the same category. I guess I played Doom and Wolfenstein and all the other things we're going to talk about here in a moment.
Yep.
I played that way before I played Catacomb, and and it's interesting now today for me to see that in retrospective the history and what developed into the other thing. And the thing that I'm noticing, and maybe I should mention it later when we're talking about it, but all the games that we mentioned so far, right? They have this typical maze look to it, and
Yep.
It's like here's a wall with or without texture, wireframe or actually solid with colors on it. We don't know, but there's a wall and there's a ceiling and there's a ground, and then something happens in the middle. Catacomb with texture mapping must have felt like, in 4 short years, and I know there were other texture map games, but to be in the first perspective and then seeing a,
Yep.
I guess the in retrospect people call it 2.5D shooters, right?
Yep.
Because it's a 2D program, but it's you have the 3D perspective that they're emulating. And to see that it must have felt like, you're departing for Jupiter tomorrow.
Yeah.
When you were in the 90s to see that on your Apple II. I think Catacomb was built for the Apple II and I guess Atari also. But
It
this
was
must have
also
been
it was
felt like
DOS.
such an innovation.
Yeah, it was a DOS based game too.
Always also for dog.
Yep.
So and also I would like to point out now we're also getting into the games or getting into the phase where games wasn't a round-based thing anymore. The
Yep.
80s, when you look at most games that came out in the 80s, they were like round based, like you had a turn and then,
Hmm.
oh, let's try the same again. And now suddenly we have a story. Suddenly the game became more interactive and the games became, it wasn't just stupid shoot and, point and shoot. It was in Catacomb, you had like, I think it's spells and potions and things like that. You had to look
Yep.
up, you can recharge your health and you
Yep.
could choose whether or not do I go this way where there is some health, but there's also going to be enemies. So you suddenly had to with that comes non-linear gameplay. With that comes all kinds of things that nowadays we take for granted, right? But
Yep.
back then it must have felt like like such an innovation, such a grand innovation.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think it was only a couple of episodes ago, I believe, that John and I talked about adventure-based games. Like adventure-based
Yeah,
games to
I,
me are the
I
ones,
watched that.
those are the ones that really started to introduce the idea of like these really deep stories.
Yeah,
And obviously other genres were going to start,
taking that on.
adopting
Yeah,
those. Yeah, adopting those and coming up with their own. So like here's Catacomb, you're talking about the whole fantasy element with the wizard and you know, trying to save somebody. So I love the fact that they added those, that the story element to it. And obviously the next
it's
game on the
really
list is going to be the one that really takes that huge leap forward because and it's also the reason why I brought up Catacomb because id Software used Catacomb as the prototype for their next game, which was and the next one was the first third person game that I remember playing.
yeah.
And we're talking about Wolfenstein 3D.
Right.
And Wolfenstein, to me, in my recollection, that was the one that put first person shooters on the map, in
Yeah,
my opinion,
I agree.
because they took a very simple concept of we're going to take World War II and we're going to have you kill a bunch of Nazis. And they threw it in this first person shooter format. And I'm
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
mean, that, like, it just, and it worked like gangbusters.
Right. And I mean, what a great concept, right? I mean, imagine, your viewers may have wondered, why does this guy speak so funny? And
Hmm.
the reason is because I was born and raised in Germany. So imagine how a game like Wolfenstein,
I'm going to say it didn't
imagine
feel
how
well,
that
did
was
it?
received in Germany.
Yeah, I was
What's
gonna
that?
say I was gonna say it probably wasn't received very well.
You would be wrong.
Really?
It was a hit.
Wow.
Smacking some Nazis, we're down with that. I
Nice.
okay, so in Wolfenstein, of course, Germans have a very apologetic attitude towards their own past, towards their own history, right? It's like we know we screwed up, to put it mildly, and but it also defines the German zeitgeist, not just in terms of how we see ourselves as an identity as a people, but also how we want to be perceived in the world, right?
Hmm.
So we never want to be. We're known for the Holocaust. We don't. When that means we have a responsibility for things like that to never happen And that zeitgeist is very much that when I grew up, I was very much in tune to that. And imagine I was when Wolfenstein came out, I was like, 9, 10 years old. It was blowing my mind. You could kill people in a computer? What? So
Mhm.
when you say it was probably wasn't well received, you're also right. And that's because, the media, I remember vividly this game discussed in the German media, and they were like, it was the VHS discussion all over again, right? It's like, it's rotting the brains of our kids, and they're all gonna grow up to become murderers if we normalize killing. And I was a kid, and I recall asking my dad, so, but we're killing Nazis. They're the bad guys, right? So, as a German kid, 10 years old in 1992, I was like dissociated. I knew the Nazi past was part of my upbringing. It's part of
Mhm.
my country. But I also dissociated like, yeah, we can kill Nazis. That's okay. They're bad people.
They're bad people,
So,
so
you know what I'm
great.
saying? And they're bad people. So, and then in Germany, there's this whole thing where you can show Nazi symbols, right? You can show swastika, you can show the Hitler salute.
Right.
Um, and those are illegal to show because they're unconstitutional signs and you get in trouble for that. So they made versions of these games where those symbols are changed. And if I remember correctly, the Wolfenstein symbol, they call it the censored version,
Hmm.
had people had people were replaced with zombies, had green blood, if I remember correctly, and I think they swapped out the swastika for an upside down triangle, so the triangle with a point, if I remember correctly.
Well,
I don't.
that would make total sense because according to again the research I was doing, Wolfenstein was actually banned from Germany due to the Nazi iconography,
Correct.
and it
Doesn't
was
really
actually
play it.
forbidden all the way until 2022.
Yes. And I forget what changed in 2022.
So
I'm not
30 years.
30, right? 30.
Yeah, banned for 30 years.
Sure.
But to your point, and this was one of the things that I found that was interesting about Wolfenstein, there were a couple of things that were very important about Wolfenstein in the first person shooter genre. First, it introduced the idea of episodes. So it wasn't just a game where you just kept going through. There were actual episodes.
Yeah.
You got to the end of levels, and then there was
Yes.
the next part of the story. And then the other element, and this is probably where it maybe came in on your end when you were a kid, is that id Software released a map editor for the
Yes.
game so players could
Yes.
create and share their own levels online.
Yeah.
So you were able to get a version of Wolfenstein that wasn't maybe the Nazi iconography type of thing. Because people were just creating their own. Not only were they making maps, but then it also started modding communities where people were modding things and whatnot. Um,
Something that we have to this day, right? It's like really
yeah,
they were among the first, if not the first, to
yep,
start it. Releasing the map editor. I remember them doing that for another game we're going to talk about in a little while. But it was brilliant. And honestly, the recipe for success here is just fantastic, right? Take an engine from Catacomb that we know works, take an idea that we know has been successful for the last 10, 15 years,
yep.
um, and put a really simple story and a really interesting approach onto it. And yeah, like you said, it worked like gangbuster, right? It's great.
Yeah, it worked great. And then obviously the success for id Software continued right after that because they went from Catacomb to Wolfenstein to Doom. And then Doom was the
To
next.
Doom.
Yeah, Doom. Doom was the next like huge hit for first person shooters. And that was
I
the
concur.
two that I remember playing too, like between Wolfenstein and Doom. I think that was my sweet spot for first person shooters before my brain went all cattywampus on me. It's,
It's Doom, I can tell you what, Doom was the first game I really ever played. So when my dad brought home the Atari 88 and such, we had games like Alley Cat and Flight Simulator, and what's the other one? Romulus was a game that I didn't speak English back in the day because I was like, how frick, I was like 7 years old, right? I didn't know English. But but Doom, we had a computer. By that point, we had a 486. And my dad did. I didn't have a computer yet because I was 10 years old.
Of course.
Um, but they had we had a 486, and I remember picking up one of those shareware CDs, and there was this monster up front, one of the brown ones you see in the first level, and
Yep.
then it said Doom on it. I was like, cool, what is that? So I bought the shareware CD, with a bunch of other games on it too, and most of them were boring. But there was Doom. There was just two levels of Doom. I played them hard. It wasn't until like about 3 or 4 years later that I got the full version of Doom,
Oh,
completely
nice.
legally, of course. And
Of course.
because wouldn't you know it, Doom became forbidden in Germany too. Or let's
Oh,
say
wow.
released, yeah, because of the violence. But
Hmm.
then eventually, I think, I'm not sure if it was forbidden immediately or if it went straight to FSK 18, meaning FSK stands for voluntary self-control, um, freiwillige Selbstkontrolle. And the video game and VHS publishers would put age recommendations onto the label.
Oh,
So,
okay.
so when 10-year-old me, right, when he saw an FSK 8 years on a game that was for 18 and up, so I'm not sure if it was actually forbidden like Wolfenstein was,
Right.
or it was just, regulated like it should have been.
Yeah, it was regulated. It's kind of like when we got the ESRB here in the United States in the 90s because of games like Mortal Kombat, Night Trap.
Yeah,
I'm sure Doom was probably referenced at the time as well.
well, I'm sure.
Um, but yeah, Doom to me like Wolfenstein I think was the one that started to wake everybody up to first person shooters, and then Doom just
Yeah,
exploded it. Um,
yeah,
everybody like to me like I don't think you can game without knowing about the Doom
yeah.
franchise.
I mean, they are still saying, the vintage computer joke is, does it run Doom, right? It's
Yeah,
and in fact, if you follow other YouTubers like Usagi Electric, he just restored a Bendix G15 vacuum tube computer from 1950 something, and he
and it
played
plays
Doom on
Doom.
it.
There you go.
Oh, I mean, not the game. He was
Yeah.
cheating a little bit, but
No,
he
no, but
played the
still,
Doom intro
but
song.
you're right. That's the whole thing. Like I remember not too long ago, Nintendo came out with the Alarmo, that clock.
Yeah.
That clock, somebody modded it and put Doom in there.
Yep.
It's like,
And just the other day, John, our mutual friend John Story, he texted me a link. I think it was Ars Technica or so, who picked up a story on a guy who modded. Hold on, let me put it together correctly. He modded his pressure cooker or his crock pot or something. He's got one of those fancy ones with a
yep,
fancy LED. He modded that, and that sucker runs Doom or
there
something
you
like
go.
that. And
Yeah,
and funnily enough, you can still use it as a crock pot while you wait for your food to finish. You might as well put in a quick round of Doom.
you just do a quick round of Doom while you're crock
Uh,
potting. That's
like
just
you're,
awesome.
isn't that
I
great?
mean,
It's
but
and it speaks to what you just said though. It's that
yep,
the Doom was so significant for the development of
yes,
video games at large, I would wager.
oh yeah,
Because it was a milestone for graphics, it was a milestone for level design, it was a milestone for game mechanics and weapon mechanics. You have
yep,
different weapons that have different effects and are
yep,
differently capable against different kind of enemies. It is the gold standard against which things had to be measured for a long, long time. To this day, even like what is if if some random device is good enough to run a Doom, it's a great device. It's a great project.
exactly. Yeah,
And also
exactly.
think and also think about the level design. Think of Wolfenstein. You were very much still in the dungeon, right?
Yes,
ceiling, floor, walls.
Yep.
And that's what I meant earlier when I said maybe I should bring it up now. Now is the time. Doom is the first person shooter that I remember that had a feeling of an open world to it.
Yes.
It wasn't an open
Yep.
world, but there are definitely, you can see out a window into the area in front of, in the first level even, when you remember
Yep.
when you are dropped into that level and you have that, I like to call it the conversation pit, when you
Oh
go
yeah.
straight, it goes down a little
I
bit,
remember that.
and then there's a window to your right
Yep.
and you can look out that window. And if you are industrious enough, you find that hidden part in the wall where you can go out. You're like, what's this? Why is this wall open? It's a secret. And there are
Yep.
secrets. I mean, Wolfenstein had secrets, but there are secrets,
Yep.
and you
Yep.
can go out freaking side.
Yep.
That was must have been another milestone when when I played that for the first time. I was like, what do you mean I'm outside the level? I'm outside the level.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
It's
I was gonna say
very
Wolfenstein.
cleverly done.
Yeah, I was gonna say Wolfenstein was very it was very limited in scope because it took place in a castle.
Sure.
Doom took place on, remember the game actually in the beginning, you start on Mars. You start on a moon on Mars. It's one of Mars's
Yeah.
moons. And then as you go through all the other levels, you finally like I believe the final level, again, of course, reading this, the final level is in hell when you
Yes.
have to fight the final boss. So like they took, yeah, to your point, it made it feel open world because they did open the world up for you. Where it's like we're not going to limit ourselves into like this
Mhm.
one location. We're going to open it up to different locations. So they took that episodic approach by opening it up and you actually got to wander through like what at the time was like a fully realized external environment.
Yeah. At the time, of course, there are limits to this, right? And really, what they
Of
have
course.
just done is they built a room inside a room that is the map, right? The map is a room, and inside that room there are several rooms. And that's clever, but it didn't feel like it didn't feel
No.
limited, especially since they had this, I forget what it's called, but they had this, when you look in the distance and there's this texture that is just basically just a sprite that is pasted to
Yep.
the far wall. And
Yep.
but when you move, the perspective changes ever so slightly.
Yep.
And you move left and right, and you would see things in perspective move faster or slower as you, depending on your point of view. My mind was blown. 10-year-old
Yeah.
Bastion's mind is still blown to this
Oh
day.
no, trust me. I trust me. My mind was blown when I played this for the first time too.
Yeah.
I mean the game. Yeah, I mean, like I said, the game was monumental. It also had a big modding scene. Again, people modders
Really?
were. Oh yeah, modders were creating all kinds of stuff with this game because again, id Software released the ability for people to mod this. Um, and actually, it's also considered the birth of speedrunning. Doom was one of the first games
Yes,
that people started
that
doing
is true.
speed runs on. Yeah, so Doom again, it's one of those games. I mean, it's in the if I'm not mistaken, it's in the Video Game Hall of Fame and rightfully so
Yeah,
because
rightfully so.
of all of these things. But now, yeah, so now we're at that place. We're at that place now where first person shooters are now widely known by gamers. They're becoming
Yes.
immensely popular, and because they're becoming immensely popular, now everybody's trying to get in on the game, right? This is the area, Bastion, where like you're gonna shine better than I
Yes.
am because this is where first person shooters were just coming out left and right. Like so many companies were getting in on this.
Yes.
Um, and
Yes.
I remember one thing we talked about before we started recording was that when I sent you my list of games for my research, how I was kind of jogging your memory to all of these other games,
Yeah.
all these games that you remember
Yeah.
experiencing. So like, not too long after Doom, like the next year, there was another series that was born, and I think they made two or three of these heretic games.
Heretic, yes, same
Yeah.
engine, right? They use the same, they licensed the Doom engine, or is the same, is it also id Software? I don't.
Correct.
I did play Heretic, and it was a very brief, there were very brief period of my life where I would just claw my hands onto anything that looked like Doom, right? So
Of
shortly
course.
thereafter, Doom 2, of course, was released, and it was really out of necessity because I mentioned earlier this was also right about the time when my family had a 486 DX266. That was the
Hmm.
processor of choice in Germany at the time. And it was that 486 was plenty fast to run anything that is Doom-ish. So it ran Doom fine, it ran Doom 2 fine, it ran Heretic fine, and there's another game along the same lines of Heretic called Hexen.
Oh,
Um,
Hexen. Yep, I've heard of that
yep,
too.
and in fact,
That
my
was
memory.
that was actually the sequel, Hexen
Oh,
Beyond
really?
Heretic.
And I just love that because I couldn't get enough of Doom, and I played through the levels a bunch of times. Didn't beat the game all that often, I must confess. But I remember one of my all-time best friend. His name is Sebastian. Yeah, my name is Bastian. His name is Sebastian.
Oh wow,
It's just
not
yeah,
confusing.
and no, it's fine. We when we were kids, we looked alike too, so people thought that we were brothers. So they asked our parents, "Why'd you name your?" Anyways, the he would come over in the afternoons, and we would play Doom or Hexen Heretic. So we played them together, like taking turns, right?
Hmm.
So and we didn't often win at the game. We didn't often beat the game, but we just
Okay.
play any of those games that were based on the same engines because the gameplay, the way how you play it, was just so innovative and so interesting to us. Especially since Heretic and Hexen had all these innovative weapons. Where I
Mm.
think was it Heretic had like a voodoo doll where if you
Ooh.
point the cursor, yeah, you point the cursor to an enemy and you stab the voodoo doll, that it would eventually perish.
Okay.
Um, that was just cool. And you had the fire. Oh no, that was Shadow Warrior. That's a different game. But there was some cool game mechanics that I just loved.
Moving into the mid '90s, we're starting to get obviously more and more first person shooters. But one of the ones that I wanted to mention is we're starting to talk about licensed franchises. Licensed franchises starting
Oh
to get in
yes.
on the game,
Yep.
and leave it to George Lucas and
Of course.
LucasArts to just jump right in here. So, like in 1995, they released Star Wars Dark Forces,
Yep.
originally released for MS-DOS and for Mac.
Yep.
A year later in '96, came out on PlayStation, and it was their first person shooter Star Wars game. Now, obviously, Star Wars, you know, ridiculously successful. Not the first Star Wars video game to come out, but obviously as a first person shooter, just take Star Wars and do a spin on it, which is really
Yeah.
cool. Um, and with all Star Wars games, um, George Lucas made sure that whatever he was creating fit into the canon of Star Wars. And that was always the interesting thing about his video games. So you play the whole story in Dark Forces, like most Star Wars video games, it's adjacent to or part of the overall world he built. So you're not playing as Luke Skywalker, you're not playing as Han Solo. It's a unique story, where he created a protagonist named Kyle Katarn, and that is who you play as. And again, it's
Yeah.
first person, so you're just shooting your way through the story on their Jedi game engine. They obviously created their own engine for this one.
Of
But
course.
again, capitalizing on this new trend of first person shooter games, using the powerhouse that is their IP with Star Wars, and creating another very well reviewed game. This game has been released since then on every conceivable system. You can actually play this game on Nintendo Switch, on PlayStation 5, on Xbox right now because
Yeah.
it's available.
Steam still has it for like,
Yeah.
not entirely cheap. So it's like, it's not like, $3, $4. It's like
Mhm.
7, 8, $9, which is
Yeah.
still it's an
Well,
okay
they
price for a game
maybe
like
it
that.
may
But
be the remastered version that came out in 24.
Star Wars Dark Forces, as soon as I had a copy of that, I basically was locked in my room for like the next 30 or so hours. It
Nice.
was it was re it was a
This episode is brought to you by FX's Love Story, John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette. Join host Evan Ross Katz on the official podcast for FX's new series, Love Story, John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette, and go behind the scenes with cast and special guests. Featuring Sarah Pigeon, Paul Anthony Kelly, Grace Gummer, and Naomi Watts. FX's Love Story, John F. Kennedy Jr. and Carolyn Bessette, wherever you listen to podcasts.
Breathtaking game for many reasons. First of all, I thought I could walk around the corner and walk into Luke Skywalker. You know what I'm saying? Is what you
Yeah.
just said about the franchise and it fits into the canon. Not only did they make that from a publicity and from a, oh, let's sell a game and let's sell it to all the Star Wars nerds. Nah, man, they sold it to the Star Trek nerds too, first of all. And second of all, it's not just the idea. It's not just they didn't just rubber stamp Star Wars on top of it. It is fully. It feels more like a Star Wars game than all the Star Trek games like that have come out in the since the 80s and the 70s and 80s and 90s and so
Mm.
with perhaps some notable differences like Judgment Rights, Final Unity, and 25th Anniversary being exceptions. But the other thing is Dark Forces. The story was so well entrenched into the canon, canon, and the engine was comparatively good at the time. And this was the time when all the PC gaming magazines, of which I subscribed to some, they were all about the graphics. The graphics need to
Yeah.
become better and better and better. Soon, we were still 2 or so years away from 3D accelerators. That was like 97 or so, if I'm not mistaken. John would know. He knows this stuff. But so it was great because of the canon. It was great because of the graphics, and it had this innovative thing like a lightsaber. I mean, the reason why I watch Star Wars is because I want a freaking lightsaber, for crying out loud. I want one.
Of
And I want
course.
to pew back the pew-pews, right? And in Star Wars, The Dark Forces, you totally could. If when they shoot at you and you were equipped with a lightsaber, it would automatically reflect the shots.
Yeah. And not only that, but the whole idea now we're getting into, and we talked about this with Doom, where they're starting to take place in more in these outside worlds, right?
Yes.
And obviously Star Wars is all about, different planets, fighting in space and stuff like that. And now first person shooters are starting to really get out there and get into this whole idea of like, oh, you know what, spaceship shoot 'em ups can be really well, done really well on PCs and Macs at this time. And
Yes.
then you have games like this one came out around the same time as Star Wars Dark Forces, the Descent series.
Descent. I was
Yeah.
hoping you would mention Descent. Yes.
Yeah, because you had talked earlier about how much you loved playing Descent. But again, it's a similar game where you're piloting a
Yeah.
spaceship and going
Yes.
through different labyrinths and stuff like that. But again, the same concept.
Yes. And the what I remember mostly about Descent is that the graphics vaguely, and I must say I just pulled it up on Wikipedia because I was hoping to speak with some authority on this, but I can't
Mm-hmm.
quickly find it. I thought to my I always looked at it as very much Doom-esque, even though you have a spaceship. And I can't tell if the engine is the same engine as Doom or not. It certainly isn't the same publisher or the same developer, so possibly not. But the graphics look and the texture mapping looked very, very similar and very, very good, was what I'm saying.
Okay.
Um, and what I remember most vividly about Descent is that you had full 3D movement control. Sure, you have that
Oh,
in first-person shooters usually where you can go and then maybe jump, right? Remember Doom, you couldn't jump, and that wasn't until a couple of
that's right.
years later when suddenly jumping, crouching, crawling was a thing.
Yep.
But in Descent, you're in a spaceship and you're in a zero gravity environment. You could turn into any direction, like gyroscopically, wherever you want. You could strafe horizontally, vertically. You could pan, tilt, and anything, and you yaw and roll and all of those things and pitch. And that made for some really cool gameplay that when we had LAN parties sometime in the late 90s, we played Descent like a lot. Um, and we played also because it had very stable network coding compared to Doom. And the network code was very good, so you could play very easily together. And it made for really cool gameplay where you can hide in the ceiling, in like a little divot in the ceiling, and you
Okay.
see on your map that someone's coming out, and you come down, shoot, and you go back up.
Go
Like
back up.
this, almost like, like Apache helicopters nowadays are they're hovering just over
Mm,
the tree line. They come up and they deploy their guns and their weapons and they come down. I felt like an Apache pilot. Talking about
that's
that,
awesome.
Apache was also a video game that I loved around the same time.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Well, I was going to say with Descent, the multiplayer mode, I'm just reading up on it too, that like you were able to have multiplayer sessions with up to 8 people.
Yeah.
You got up to 8 players in that, and that's awesome. And they had both competitive and cooperative sessions. So it wasn't
Yes.
always about just taking each other out. It was also doing a co-op mode too. So that's really cool. Um, and then as we move on beyond Descent,
Yeah.
we get into another franchise that was already in existence, but
Yes.
not as a first person shooter. And this
Same
was
with
in nine
Catacomb, the third game in the series. The first one to
exactly
become the biggest hit is Duke
Duke
Nukem
Nukem.
3D.
Duke Nukem
I
3D.
talk about Duke Nukem.
Of course, well, of course, because again, my, like I said, my experience with first person shooters is very like limited in terms of which ones hit me, and the ones that hit me
Okay.
were Wolfenstein, Doom, and then Duke Nukem 3D. I remember Duke Nukem
Yeah.
3D very very well, and it's probably because at this
Same.
time I had a PC,
Yep.
and this was probably around the first time I really got like I had a Commodore 64, but that was made for gaming, right? It wasn't made like a full functioning PC. It was around the mid
Sure.
90s that I really got my first PC. And
Yeah.
so, and it was right around the time when, yeah, again, your Dooms, your Wolfensteins, your Duke Nukems were really at their height. So
Yes.
I remember playing Duke Nukem on my PC, and I was just like, okay, this is really cool because I'm shooting up a bunch of aliens.
Oh no. Yes. Yeah. And I tell you, it's Duke Nukem was the game that I wanted to play the most, but it took the longest for me to actually have access to because it was in Germany, but also because we had the DX266, and I know with quite some authority that Duke Nukem is basically unplayable on that
Oh,
type of a computer.
oh
It
wow.
was
Okay.
really at that point, all my friends had moved on to Pentium 90s, Pentium 133s, and things like that. And it wasn't until my family upgraded to a Pentium 166 MMX that I finally could, which is like a year or so later, so 97-ish or so. And back in the 90s, computers were becoming so fast, right?
Mhm.
That you would have your computer become obsolete very quickly. And Duke Nukem I was dying to play that. Other than visiting friends' house, I couldn't, which is part of the reason why I sunk my teeth into everything else I could get, like Hex and Heretic and things like that.
Of course.
But Duke Nukem, I still play Duke Nukem to this day. The Megatron edition and the republished versions of the high-res
Yeah.
graphics look really nice. I mean, comparatively speaking, and the gameplay is still interesting. The story is still interesting. All the lewdness in the game is still, gets me giggling every single
Yep.
go to the bathroom and then, or the fact that you could in so many aspects of the world, like get a soda from the machine or tip the stripper. Like I said, I'm easily entertained, but those are things you could do. And then very soon after, the Duke Nukem is the first experience I had modding games myself.
Oh,
They
really? Okay.
released the game editor as well. In fact, it was right there on the CD, was the level editor, which was insanely complicated. And for as a 14-year-old me, actually stuck with it and read through the 300 or so page manual. I mean, it may have been less than that. I don't know. It felt like a lot to me when I was a kid. But I sat there and I learned how to use this thing. And I made some pretty boring levels that were probably technically well done, I guess, but I didn't have. I'm not like a very creative kind of guy, so they were very boring levels. But heck, I had fun making them.
Well, I was
So
just
that
gonna
is
say, I mean, the
really,
whole point of that was just enjoy yourself, it was your first opportunity, at least on your end, to do something creative with the game itself. And it's just awesome because you had a game that
yeah,
had an endless experience because of, all the modders making different levels for it. Same thing with Doom and stuff like that. So, um, it's really, really
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
Nice.
So,
The other game we totally have to talk about is Quake because I don't think I that is Duke Nukem and Quake belong together for me. You know, they came out roughly around the same time. At least in Germany, they were available roughly around the same time. Half my friends bought the one game, the other half the other game, and then of course we and Quake had just such a great atmosphere. It was delightful. The soundtrack was great. The sounds were great. It was endless fun. Shooting a nail gun as opposed to a machine gun was just, great.
that's really cool. See, Quake was one of the games that obviously at this point, I wasn't really looking at these types of games on my PC anymore. I had started to drift
Yeah,
off
yeah.
playing games like Myst and Seventh Guest and things like that. Like I was
Oh,
really
Mist.
getting
I
into
remember
more,
Mist. Yeah.
yeah, like I was more getting into those types of games. But obviously Quake, uh, a very impactful game. Again, another hit from id Software, working on that. And then, like you said the soundtrack in the game was really good. It was actually some of the music in the game was composed by Trent Reznor from Nine Inch
Yes.
Nails.
Yes.
So huge thing. But and the interesting thing about Quake, again, for somebody like me, the theme of the game and the story of the game is right up my alley because it's very like it's got that H.P. Lovecraft kind of feel to it.
Yeah.
Very science fiction, very fantasy. So like definitely something that I would have loved. But again, it was also at the time when first person shooters were starting to give me issues and I couldn't play them.
Oh,
So
yeah.
yeah, I don't know what happened somewhere around this was around that time when I fell off the first person shooter thing because I just couldn't deal with the headaches I
It's
was getting.
yeah, and I remember also there was a time when I forgot what this game. It was like a game where you play a secret agent, and it was a female secret agent. It was like a James Bond type thing, and she would.
Oh, that was actually brought up on one of my episodes last year from Chris from Two Middle-Aged Guys Trying to Work It All Out. We had brought up like kind of obscure games, and he mentioned that one. I know exactly the one you're talking about. I just don't remember the name of it.
It was so obscure, but it had in this game magazine I subscribed to. It had this great review as like a niche game, and it was
Yep.
endless fun. I remember wasting I remember wasting an entire Christmas weekend on that game, and I was so disappointed when it was suddenly over. But it was such a fun. But anyways, there was also the time when lots of my friends report the same thing that you just talked about, where they're like, I can't play these fast games anymore. They're like giving me a headache, or they're giving me like, worse yet, seizures.
Oh
That's
wow.
when, yeah, that's when that's why my undergraduate degree is in cognitive science, not computer science, because I became interested in the human brain and how computing works, not only in hardware but also on in the brain. So it was very
Oh wow.
interesting to me. So I learned a lot about seizures, and and seizures got me interested in the brain, and I learned a lot about seizures later on.
So the name of that game that you were talking about was called No One Lives Forever.
Thank you. Oh my God.
Yes.
Yes, sir. No one lives forever. I've
Yep.
thought about this game a lot lately, and no one lives forever. Man, I wonder if you can still
Write
get
it.
it
I was gonna say
on
write it
Steam or
down,
so.
and I was gonna say write it down. Find yourself a
Write
copy,
it the heck down, Bastion.
yeah,
No one lives forever.
even if you can't get it on Steam, if it's available, like that's what eBay's for, right? Get yourself an OG
That's
copy.
what. Correct.
Um, but going back to Quake, so because obviously Quake again came out in '96 from id Software. Um,
Yep.
it is it. I believe it's also in the Video Game Hall of Fame now too. It's often cited as one of the best games ever made. The only reason why I know of Quake, obviously, besides the the background behind it, is because They made a mod to the game that was incredibly popular based off the X-Men franchise, and I'm a huge X-Men fan.
Yes.
Um, and when I found out about that, I was like, I've never played it, but I've always wanted to get a copy of the X-Men mod that they did with it. I forgot what the name of it. I think it was like the Ravages of Apocalypse or something like that. It was something Apocalypse related.
Really?
Yes, and I've always wanted a copy of that, and I might actually, yeah, X-Men: The Ravages of Apocalypse. That's what it was called.
Outstanding.
But Quake, yeah, Quake to me is also one of those ones where it's like, id Software again just comes out with another one that everybody loves.
It's tax season, and at LifeLock, we know you're tired of numbers. But here's a big one you need to hear. Billions. That's the amount of money in refunds the IRS has flagged for possible identity fraud. Now here's another big number. 100 million. That's how many data points LifeLock monitors every second. If your identity is stolen, we'll fix it guaranteed. One last big number. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for the threats you can't control. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Redfin. You're listening to a podcast, which means you're probably multitasking. Maybe even scrolling home listings on Redfin, saving homes without expecting to get them. But Redfin isn't just built for endless browsing. It's built to help you find and own a home. With agents who close twice as many deals, when you find the one, you've got a real shot at getting it. Get started at redfin.com. Own the dream.
Yeah, and Quake in particular was interesting to me because, um, in Duke Nukem, the monsters were sprites, right? They were basically just like Mario, is a character that has like a couple of animation sequences, and the animation sequences are basically pictures that are always facing you, and that's the sprite is like in 3D games, the sprite will always look at you, and if you turn, sprite will turn with you so that you always have the same perspective on it. And the monsters were different in Duke because you had like 3 or 4 different sprites if you approach them from behind and things like that. But what they would do is they would remove the sprite and then pop a different one, and it's the same monster and you shoot it. But in Quake, those suckers were 3D characters. So it immediately felt like this is not just, a comic book that I can shoot at. This felt like, I'm actually in the dungeon. And Quake had all these neat little features where if a corpse was sitting around long enough, it would attract flies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and all these things that make it feel a little bit more realistic, things that I didn't really came to expect of games until things like Grand Theft Auto, the 3D series, like Grand Theft Auto, like San Andreas or so was the first game where I picked up on the fact that there are things you can do in the world that make the world feel realistic, right?
Yeah.
And Grand Theft Auto 5, of course, has that's almost all you do. But Quake was the first one where I picked up on the things like, is this flies? Is this moths on the lantern over there? Yup.
Yeah.
Or you can shoot the lantern. Could you shoot the lantern in Quake? I forget. But you could.
That I don't know. But I will say what you said earlier is like the Quake engine was unlike the Doom engine. The Quake engine offered real-time 3D rendering, which is where this thing really made a huge leap forward for first-person shooters.
I feel like if you permit me, are we done talking about Quake? We can continue talking about Quake if
we can move on from Quake.
And a slight backtrack, it feels like almost, but there's one game that I think we should mention just because it is also recently relevant again. I think we should mention Time Crisis.
Oh, wow. I completely forgot about Time Crisis.
Yeah, me too, until just now. I was like, wait a minute, the reason why I remember that is because over here I backed the gamey Time Crisis Kickstarter that came out a couple of months ago.
Oh yeah,
and I made a video on my channel on where I review the game and the guns, and I get a lot of flack on that video for not mentioning enough how terrible the calibration is. And I'm
Mhm.
like, yes, hi, how's it going? Have you played the arcade machine Time Crisis? Because it was pretty inaccurate.
Yep.
But in Time Crisis, it was like I guess it was the best of the light gun games in the arcade,
Okay.
but it was still pretty awful, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
So
Around this time, I think I remember Time Crisis and I remember Terminator 2 with the machine gun.
yes, Terminator. I never played Terminator 2 until at Retro GameCon where we met.
Oh, there you go.
Yep. So it's but Time Crisis came out in 1994, 1995 with
95. Yep.
and I didn't pay attention to it until 96, 97 when it became available, well, available enough in Germany that an early teenager would pick up on it.
Okay.
And also, that's when the DOS port came out. And I played
Ah,
that a lot.
okay.
And the DOS port was very, very difficult. So it's like, you really had to have a good equipment. Like, any Olympian will tell you that your equipment matters, how you perform. And boy, I had a really shitty serial mouse. And it was a hard game to play with that, but it's I think it's an iconic thing because it was meant to be played in an arcade. It was meant to be played with a light gun. And there have been light gun games before then. Like, we all know what is it, Duck Hunt that came with the NES and
Duck
Super
Hunt.
Mario.
Oh yeah.
Awful. Yeah, it's I mean, I still play it, right? But
Of course you do. So do
um
I.
but it's objectively awful, right? And
Hmm.
other light gun games like the Atari, what is it? Atari XT, no, not the XT, the Atari 8-bit console. Geez, what is it called? I just picked one up
Um,
recently and I got a light gun for it,
oh,
and I
the
have
S. You're talking about the ST?
yes, 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 yes.
The Atari ST. Yeah.
But this stuff, what was the console? Okay, it doesn't matter. And it has a light gun too. So there's been light gun games before Time Crisis, but I feel like Time Crisis is the one that everyone knows. And lately there's a modern remake for it. So it's
Not surprising.
not surprising. And it's actually like I think the modern remake is actually fairly well done for what it is. It's a little bit pricey, especially considering you only get 4 games on that box.
Okay.
So it's like it feels like you should be able to port other games on this. You should open this thing up so that people can put their own software on it and then play, I don't know, Duke Nukem with a light gun, with a Time Crisis light gun. That would be fun. But Time Crisis came out around the same time, and when you compare the Time Crisis graphics wise and game mode wise to Duke and to Quake, it really doesn't hold up, right? It's
No, I would say no.
the camera zooms, flies by
Yeah.
itself through the level, and all you do is you pick up your gun and then you
Well,
shoot,
that
and then you
yeah.
realize how heavy it becomes after a while.
Well, I was gonna say yeah, because that's the thing. Like shooters like that when they came out in the arcade were a lot more limited in scope because they dictated what direction they went in.
Yeah,
Whereas when you're playing like Doom or a Duke Nukem or Quake, you're controlling where you're
yeah,
going.
yeah.
Um, so, but yeah, I
I
mean,
think the first-person shooter is not a good genre to put into an arcade machine, unless you put a
not
gimmicky
necessarily.
controller to it, right?
Yeah, well, and that's the whole thing. Like like arcade shooters, for the most part, they are all. It's just all about the shooting part of it. You don't get to
Yeah,
control the characters. You're really just shooting a screen.
yeah,
So it's definitely way more limited than the first
yeah.
person shooters we played on PC and console.
I agree.
Um,
And I must say that the thing that interested me about the three first-person shooters the most wasn't so much the shooting. I mean, I guess when I was younger, I got to shoot things, so that was fun. But what I like the 3D immersive environment the best about it. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? More so than, a game like Diablo where you have the three-quarter 3D view. I liked Diablo, but it didn't grab me the same way a 3D first-person shooter would grab me, or 2.5D for that matter. And then, of course, when I played Time Crisis on arcade, spent like $8 or whatever and in coins to pop in
Of
that thing.
course.
And then it was dead after 3 minutes and was like, well, that was, but
Yeah.
it's still an iconic 3D first-person shooter game, I feel.
No, and I'm glad you circled back on that one. I think we've done a good job covering
So many out
quite
there.
a breadth of um, the monumental ones in the industry. Um,
I think so.
so
I think we touched upon the major milestones in development very nicely. And we can talk endlessly about these because there's so many great ones out there.
yeah, we absolutely can. And I think though, Bastion, we're gonna wrap it up right here with our first
I
person
think so.
shooter. And again, I cannot thank you enough for being on this episode, especially because my knowledge of first person shooters is not that vast. So I love the fact that I got to sit here, talk with you about them. You're definitely very knowledgeable in it, in this genre. And last
Thank
but
you.
not least, where can people find you out there in the
You can
internets?
So you can find me on my YouTube channel at RetroByteMeister or on retrobytemeister.com. Visit me on my socials, linktree.com /retrobytemeister. Actually, it's link.tree, right?
Yeah.
Slash retrobytemeister. Here to sponsor my hobby and a nation of all things retro computing and repair work. Go buy something from my refurbished store. They're all really, really well done, I hope.
And the links are going to be here in the in the description for the video. So definitely click on those, check those out. Um, and then for those of you out there who want to follow the Retro Gamers Podcast, you can find us everywhere at Retro Gamers Podcast. You can watch us or listen to us on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube at Retro Gamers Podcast, and you can also find us on Facebook, on Instagram, on Blue Sky at Retro Gamers Podcast, and now also on Patreon at Retro Gamers Podcast. Please come check us out there. There's some subscription based material where you can check out special bonus levels for every podcast episode we drop and other exclusive content as well if you sign up under our subscription there. Bastion, one more time, thank you so much for being on the show. I cannot wait to have you back for another episode. I'm sure it's going to be great.
Thanks for having me.
And for everybody out there, well, before I close it off, if you have anything that you want to talk about, did we not cover something on first person shooters? Do you have a special first person shooter game? Please sound off in the comments section. And on that note, we will catch you next time on the Retro Gamers Podcast.